Benefactor underwriting for this broadcast has been provided by a grant from Republic Bank. The power of red is back. Major underwriting support for this broadcast has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Customers Bank, Collins Building Services, Marks Paneth. Additional underwriting support has been provided by grants from AmTrust Title, Bank of America, Capital One Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC, Handler Real Estate Organization, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Catsimatidis Red Apple Group, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Ocean First Bank, RPW Group, TD Bank, the One Stop Property Group, and these friends. It's called cannabis. It's called hemp. It's a subject of major confrontation around the nation. It's been in Colorado. It's partially in California. It is approved in New York and New Jersey. But I'm not the one who can really explain this. So I've assembled a group with the help of Jen to provide their insight on what's happening in cannabis, especially in the New York, New Jersey regions. My guests include Jen Rosselli, who is a partner at Genova Burns, Brendan Robinson, who is the co-founder and vice president at 420 NJ Events and a variety of other companies. Laura Presentra, who is the president and CEO of Enso Sciences, New Jersey. And last but not least, from upstate New York, Brian Haynes, who's the CEO of Haynes NY. So Jen, since you're the individual responsible for bringing three of the people today, let's talk about, first of all, the practice of Genova Burns with your specialty in cannabis and why you felt it was important to bring Laura and Brendan.
So we are a full service law firm, but we've been involved in the cannabis practice since the first round of medical. So we've pretty much been in this from the ground up, which is unusual for a kind of a firm of our size and location, but it puts us in a really great position for watching what's happening, being kind of in the forefront and helping clients guide their way through these processes as they change. I mean, this is in New Jersey, it's all new. So we are really excited to watch it grow, really excited to see how it evolves. And Laura and Brendan couldn't be better guests for your show. I mean, Brendan, you said, has a host of various companies, and he has been involved on all aspects. His background is ridiculous in terms of his business knowledge, his social justice knowledge. I mean, you really couldn't have found better. And same with Laura. Laura is working her way through the beginnings of this process here. She's got experience throughout the country. And again, I would be doing a disservice if I left her bio at that, but I'll let her speak to her expertise a little bit more too.
And I'm going to ask Laura and Brendan to talk a little bit about the backgrounds and what they're doing. But I just noticed that 300 companies have just applied for licenses in New Jersey over there. Is that for licenses in medical and in retail?
Actually, right now we're at the rec market, and we are just starting to walk into cultivation and processing, and there is some laboratory testing, but I'm not sure they counted that in that 300. We will see the retail open up in March here in Jersey, which we're all really excited to watch. But we do have a couple of months to go before those applications become available to the public.
With regard to that, what are the taxes on the retail? Because as one person said to me when I was in Colorado, it's easier to buy directly from the dealer because it's less expensive than buying from the legitimate operation because of the taxes.
It's going to be all set. It's set by the regulations and the statute. There is some truth to the concept of the illicit market, something I think Jersey was very sensitive to. We saw what happened in in California, we saw what happened in Oregon. We've kind of seen this balancing act between a regulated market space So I think we'll see some of that evolve more as time passes and adjustments in the future, but I think it's something that everybody in this playing field is very sensitive to.
Laura, tell us about your company and your involvement in the cannabis business.
My background, just very generally, is that I used to work on Wall Street. I worked there for 5 years, and then I quit because I found Wall Street to be a little bit soulless. So I brought my dad out of retirement, and we wanted to start a give back agricultural business entity. And that sort of led us down the rabbit hole into hemp and then pure cannabis. So about 5 years ago, we started as passive investors in the space. And so we deep dove into every company we looked at, similar to how we would do on Wall Street. And we did massive research. And in the industry, we witnessed large amounts of incapability and a lack of bona fide building of businesses. So during this whole time, we hired all of these different types of experts to educate ourselves, because I wasn't involved in the space before 5 years ago. I was doing energy research and distressed debt trading. So
I mean, CLOs have such a similarity to cannabis.
yes, very, very similar. Yes. So then we spoke to a lot of experts, including geneticists, plant scientists, pharma, chemistry, CPG, you name the part of the supply chain, and we talked to experts and had them hired on for us as research analysts. So that whole research phase led us into now become operators in the space, as well as investors in states that have become distressed, such as California. A lot of these companies have fallen sometimes 97% from their peak. So we are looking at states such as California and others, but we are also very focused on New Jersey and New York in these limited licenses states. New Jersey is our main focus at the moment, with our goal to then create a nationwide business. So essentially creating an MSO from scratch. So in our New Jersey business, social equity and diversity has been ingrained in our DNA from the start. And finally, we are in the process of building an incubator to support social equity applicants to be successful and participate in the economic upside. And we have plans to expand this across the country.
Brendan, the former banker, I got two former bankers because Brian's a former banker also, with three. Laura has got three former bankers. This is different from being with Santander. So tell us about one or two or three of your companies, because there are numerous companies, many of them in the social justice arena.
For sure. Yeah, it's interesting, Michael. It's not as different as you would think it is. Obviously both industries are highly regulated, but when you think about cannabis, and obviously we're doing the social equity work, it's something I kind of fell into by accident, to be quite honest with you. I was working at Santander, actually started or helped start our Black employee network there. So when I left the bank and got into cannabis, we're obviously waiting for applications to pick up and things like that. We started pushing our 420 NJ events movement. And honestly, my brother and I, Stan Okoro, we started it back in 2017, but didn't start pushing it to the end of 2020. And we got into space and just saw how drastic the educational gap was around cannabis, right? Of course, people like to smoke, people like to obviously medicate, but there's so many elements to the endocannabinoid system that folks just don't realize. Once I got into space and found my niche, I felt as though it was an obligation to really help push the social equity component. We're living in a country where the war on drugs has beaten so many disenfranchised communities, and being able to go into these communities and really help these individuals have opportunity to create generational wealth through cannabis is an honor. Meeting folks like Laura and her team, and obviously Jen and Genova Burns, we all have the same plight. So the social equity advocacy is not just a talking point like it is for some others. Even when you think about New Jersey, we came out and created something called micro businesses, where folks, in these disenfranchised areas can get their applications pushed to the front of the line. But as Laura mentioned, we're looking to build an incubator to help those individuals build out their businesses and ensure they're sustainable. So it's really exciting, man. Very exciting, actually.
So here's the question: how difficult? And then I'm going to get Brian, who's getting licensed in New York. How difficult is it to get licensed in the state of New Jersey to be in the cannabis business? I mean, do you have to have a farm? Do you have to take care of the plants? I mean, what are the rules and regulations to get licensed, Jen?
Right now, the process is kind of multi-stepped and multifaceted. You've got the state licensing system, which is available for those two types of licenses, available online. And it's basically a soup to nuts assessment of who you are, who your team is, what your plans are. But then you also have to take a step back and look at your municipalities. New Jersey is a home rule state. We like our towns, we like our counties, we like making our own rules. And the way our statute is structured here in New Jersey, it allows that. So the hardest part, at least in my opinion, is finding the right place to be, because you've got some 560, 600 different towns. You've got a group who have said, yes, we're welcoming this. We've got a group that have said, no, we're not welcoming this. And figuring out how to put yourself in a market space that wants you and hasn't already built limitations that says, no, I'm not coming in, or no, you can't have this many licenses. So it's difficult in the sense that it takes a lot of strategy. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of investigatory work. But the application itself is pretty self-explanatory. Who are you? What are you doing?
You just mentioned that you can opt out. And I noticed in either an article that you had on your blog, or there was an article saying that a significant number of cities and municipalities in New Jersey opt out, and also opting out in New York. I know that the village of Southampton, East Hampton, they've opted out of this. A lot of places are opting out of this. Brian, let's talk about opting out and talk about how it is in upstate. You're in Binghamton, New York, correct?
Yes, the opting out is basically for the dispensaries and for the on-site use. Most of the people that have, or the portion of the people that have opted out because they can opt back in and are concerned about the regulations. They haven't seen the regulations yet. That's on the dispensaries. On the on-site, I think there's only 2 that have actually opted into that. Most municipalities don't want that for whatever reason. But the dispensaries opt out, come back in after January. That's what some of the legislators up here have been recommending. If you're unsure, just opt out. But some of them are hardcore not to have it. I think you'll see a lot of the space open up here for dispensaries because of the tax revenue.
What is the tax revenue in New York State?
Well, there's 3 main sources: 9% to the state, 4% for the locality, and then there's this THC tax, which is really, a lot of people are trying to get rid of it because it's so cumbersome, especially for small business people entering into the market that are in small businesses are going to have an issue with trying to figure out how to calculate it.
What is that tax
It's a
on?
percentage on, it's a number on each product per milligram of THC in that product. So there's one price for flour, one price for concentrate. And it just creates, if you're a small business, it's like anything else, the more regulation and the more becomes more cumbersome. So people are pushing to say, okay, if you want whatever, just pick a number like Massachusetts, let's say it's 20%, instead of having all this going through. I think one of the benefits of hopefully with Tremaine Wright, she started and had a small business for 10 years. So I think she will understand when you're starting a small business and you're all these regulations and cumbersome of reporting, hopefully they'll get rid of that and just come up with a flat.
What happened to, I think, Laura, you wrote this in one of your blogs or your information. Look what happened in Canada. The decimation of these companies in Canada, they were very happy to have the cannabis, and now they're not doing well. So let's talk about that. And then I must address 2 other points. The federal government taxation on cannabis is very prohibitive. I'd like someone to address that.
Well, we've done it. I just talked to, actually just got off the phone yesterday with one of the accountants. That's the 280E. New York State is going to decouple from the federal tax. So you can take all write off all your expenses. The federal, you can only basically do cost of goods and direct labor. That's my understanding. So yeah, the hardest hit will be the dispensaries, because they'll wind up paying of their net income, 75% of it to taxes, just because the way the law is. But for processor or a cultivator, you have more ways, more deductions you're allowed to take before you get hit on the bottom line with the net income.
A couple of weeks ago, I did a show with bankers, and I brought up the topic with bankers and also with a very successful business person, the topic of cannabis. And when I said to the bankers, what's your involvement? Will you lend to somebody who's in the cannabis business just as the retail location? And basically, it was a unanimous comment. I'm not ready at this time. So all of the bankers who were on the show, none of them said that they would lend to a landlord to pay, for the retail location. So they were all adverse to this. Are you seeing any changes that the bankers or the professionals, Laura, Brendan, on this topic?
Yeah, we're not, because of the federal illegalization still. So because it's an illicit market, and it's still a Schedule I drug, technically, these federally chartered banks still can't touch it.
Yeah, which is very problematic, Michael, because you think about the capital needed to get a retail location up and running. It's very, very expensive, and to not have banking available to you, it definitely hinders the playing field.
I believe Columbia Care has their own credit card. Will you have an ATM at these legitimate places over there? Are people going to go outside, because they can't charge it on their credit card?
I mean, that's certainly something that we've seen in other places and other locations. I mean, nationally, we are challenged by the fact that it still remains illicit. It is still a controlled substance, and it does make it become more of a cash market than any other form of, I can't think of another industry that is quite as cash only. And that's certainly challenging. It makes raising the capital in the beginning very challenging. It's part of why I think Jersey structured with the conditional licenses. You can kind of get all your ducks in a row and then come back and say, this is how I'm going to fund my plans. But without some change on the federal level, you're absolutely correct. It is a huge challenge to people who are entering into the market.
What is the federal government's position on changing the rules on this taxation, the illicit situation? Laura, Brian, Brendan?
Well, Schumer has tried to do it, but he's meeting total resistance. I don't see it changing anytime in the near future for the federal.
Yeah, I'll
Right.
piggyback off that. We haven't seen any movement in the past year, and I don't expect to see it, maybe 1 to 2 to 3 years, look in the crystal ball, but yeah,
So-
I'm not optimistic.
So how do you operate if you have these problems? I mean, you can't get banking, okay? You need a location. How you can't, it's like operating in a vacuum. What do you do? Okay, there's good and bad, okay? And I think, Brendan, you've spoken about it. People were going to jail for possession of marijuana in the past. What do we do today with regard to, there's good social needs, okay? There are situations, one of my friends was talking to me, mentioning that his mother remembers going back to the speakeasy before Prohibition. Okay, in a similar, I hate to utilize the similar manner.
Mhm.
So the question is, now you're going to go into these lounges over there. I've seen a couple of stores in Manhattan in different locations who sell medical marijuana, but they don't let anyone in unless you have that card. What are the rules going to be? How are you going to protect this? And how are you going to omit crime? What's your thoughts about that?
The key here, kind of touching on what Laura was just saying, we have to institutionalize cannabis first and foremost, right? So when you think about it, we have to educate folks around what this plan is, what it does, how it works from a financial perspective, a business perspective. In building out some of our platforms, we have a lot of dialogue with different folks in New Jersey. And the first thing they ask me when I talk to them is, I want my own strain. And I go, okay, that's great. Do you know what goes into getting your own strain? Do you know the kind of work, time, energy, effort, financial capacity? So I think the first piece is just going to be providing an educational platform. Then I think we got to really look at partnering up with the government to create job placement, workforce development, all these different things, so that if you're going to allow folks to come in this industry, to your point about Prohibition, this is brand new. We're only going to get the legalization of cannabis in New York, New Jersey one time, right? But we need to make sure these individuals know what they're doing, know what's expected of them. And you mentioned kind of keeping out the bad stuff and the illicit stuff. I mean, listen, the market's going to be the market. You mentioned the taxation earlier. There's different things that are going to kind of respond to one another, almost like a broken windows theory, if you will. But I think the key here is just for us to just institutionalize this plant and really create a system where individuals can get into it, create a sustainable pathway, if you will, and really promote an environment of reach one, teach one, lift each other up. And I think that that's what this plan is. It's going to cohesively bring us all together and just make the world a better place.
In my reading, it noticed that there's an opportunity for minorities, women, disabled vets. Okay, there are a lot of opportunities over there. Let's talk about the opportunities for people in those categories. Who are I know, Brian, you're a vet and you had a disabling condition over there. Laura, and Brendan, you're a minority situation. Where is the government doing on this type of opportunities for the people who could not get these licenses before and who don't really have the financial wherewithal to get the licensing?
Well, Michael, that's where I feel as though the government fell short. We created the micro businesses and we created priority applications. So a social equity applicant, a woman applicant, so on and so forth, will go to the front of the line because of the fact that they're labeled an MBE, WBE, so on and so forth. That's great in terms of getting us in the door. But as I mentioned earlier, there's 3 phases to this. You have your application, you have your build out, and then your operation. So if I get approved, if Laura gets approved, if Jen gets approved, that's great. But then what happens? Right? There's a huge educational gap that's there. You got to have the business acumen to go build a team. You got to know who to go to for insurance, who to go to for real estate, the lawyers to do your trade market, building out your website, doing your marketing. These are all things that the individuals that these programs were designed to help may or may not know. So it's great that we have the social equity, process in place, but it's just not enough, in my opinion.
What about the big corporations, the publicly held companies who are in the cannabis business? How are they attacking New York and New Jersey? Jen?
We saw in the medical rounds, what the goal articulated was to get it in quickly with established businesses. We've heard the executive director make those comments. I'm paraphrasing terribly, but those were the comments. I think the push for this next round is to give an opportunity to a more mom and pop business. You have these micro businesses, which are a smaller scale operation, and then obviously your full scale licenses that could potentially become much larger in your silos first, and then hopefully expanding to different vertical integration by mixing and matching your licenses down the line. Reality is that the bigger businesses come in with more money. But I think right now is a really good opportunity for anybody who wants to be a business owner in New Jersey who has an interest in this. This is a good time to really get into the marketplace because it is new, as Brendan said, and there are opportunities and priority reviews that are available to you as well.
So for somebody who's watching this show, what is the cost to go into this business, since you say it's good for a small person, an entrepreneur? What are the startup expenses to get a license to be in the business?
In New York State, they're going to put together a $200 million fund and establish an incubator just for people that Brendan had talked about that don't have the business acumen to get started and don't have the capital. There'll be grants, there'll be loans. Obviously going around all the, the minority, women, disabled vets, and distressed farmers to get them in the business. I think most of that will focus on dispensaries because that's the easier way for somebody that doesn't have the business acumen or the ability to process and manufacture. But they have that in vision, and that will be set up with the incubator and the funds to bring them in. That's in New York.
When is the first New Jersey legal store expected to open? Laura?
The application started being accepted for cultivation and processing on December 15th, 2021. So, pretty recently. And it's a rolling application process. And they said that they're going to let, people who applied around that date within 90 days. But they also mentioned that they can extend that. So we don't really know when that will occur or when they will issue those licenses. And then, as Jen stated earlier, the retail licenses, the application process does not open until March 15th, 2022, so in a couple of months. So then you can kind of, push that out to the future 90 days. That's when they'll be issued. And then who knows how long it takes to open from then. So, give or take maybe 6 to 8 months before you see the first, maybe even legal retail store open.
So here's the question. I know that it's a state in New York State, it's difficult to open up a wine and spirit shop near a church. Are there similarities with regard to opening up a dispensary or a store in New Jersey and New York?
In New York, it's exactly like the alcohol and beverage. In fact, they basically took that law and it's put right onto the cannabis. So if you're in that, whatever the restrictions are for churches and schools, it's exactly the same for the dispensaries. Actually, for anything really, but it's probably the dispensaries that are going to come more into play.
New Jersey?
New Jersey's identical. So it's, there's regulations involved with feet from schools, churches, and each municipality can then implement their own rules depending on how far away they want them from those specific entities.
Gambling has just become, betting has been approved in New York. Do we see New York City as the massive location for this? Or, do we see certain cities, let's say hypothetically, right near the Meadowlands, where there are a lot of people near shopping centers and so on? Are we going to see in the American Dreams shopping center a large dispensary?
I hope so.
Absolutely.
Michael, I mean, when you think about northern New Jersey and New York City, man, we already interchange with pretty much everything we do already. I think that that's just going to be a booming area for cannabis. Just obviously for the financial purposes, but then just the plant is designed to bring folks together, like I mentioned earlier. And I think that as we see, more and more stores open up, obviously we get to federal legalization at some point. I think that that cannabis has an opportunity to really heal a lot of the ills we've been facing over the last 18 months with this pandemic.
So, I think in summation, it's here, it's ready to go, but you have to iron out the kinks, as they would say. And I'm very happy that Jen has been helpful to bring people together for the show. Hopefully we'll have an update in a couple of months when the first dispensary, we'll even have a picture of the first dispensary. I'd like to thank Jen, Laura, Brian, and Brendan, and I'll see you next week.